Morning.
Hi.
Morning.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning.
Hey, Angela.
Morning.
Hi. Good morning.
So, good morning, everybody. It's Ashley here, and welcome to this webinar this morning, Managing and Implementing ePortfolios in your centre. So, we have a really kind of action-packed schedule here. I will be handing over to Caitríona Cullen, Coordinator of West Wicklow Youthreach, and one of her teachers there, Rachael Doherty. And then from there, we have a special guest, Dan Hamilton, who's an external authenticator, and he was involved in the authentication for assessment back in June for West Wicklow Youthreach. So just to give a very quick little bit of context before I hand over to Caitríona, West Wicklow Youthreach embarked on a journey of implementing ePortfolios for the June assessment in their programme. It's been a very exciting, but I suppose work-filled project that they've embarked on there. A huge amount of work has gone into getting these ePortfolios rolled out and implemented within the centre. So giving that a little bit of context, we're here to share that journey with you this morning, but also if we could ask you to maybe look at it through the lens of, would this work in my programme? And also kind of to maybe think about challenges that you might have. And we will be sending out a Mentimeter, a live poll during this session that you'll be able to feed back into. So any concerns that you have or challenges that you think you might have, if this is something that you're looking at bringing into your centre, please feed back to the poll. So Caitríona's getting set up there. So when you're ready, Caitríona, I'm going to hand over to you. You will need to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you. I actually dropped off, so it kind of muted and went blank on me, but we're good now. Great. Good morning, everybody, and you're all very, very welcome. I suppose the first thing, we myself and Rachael and Ashley and Dan, who will be joining us later, really want to say thank you very much. We know how busy everybody are on the ground right now, and I appreciate how challenging times are, but it's great to have everybody on board, and we're very excited this morning to share this information with you in terms of how we have implemented and managed portfolios within the West Wicklow Youthreach service. I suppose one of the first things I would say is that, our team and what we've done, we're by no means the experts in this field. A lot of what we've done actually is very much self-taught. And, today, and even today, this morning, we were troubleshooting and discussing elements of ePortfolios. I suppose I always like to kind of say as well that I'm very fortunate that I have an excellent team working around me that are very creative, flexible and innovative, and have been extremely so over the last, I suppose, 6 to 7 months. I also do need to acknowledge Ashley's input. Ashley has worked very closely with my team since probably, I suppose, mid to late April. And, a lot of this work that we've done would really not be very possible without her help, support and guidance. So thank you, Ashley. What I would say also is this is not the finished product by any means. It is a very simple structure that we have designed in-house that very much, I suppose, works for what we needed in May and June of this year in terms of the QQI assessment period in August, and it works. So I suppose they were the important things for us. In terms of, what exactly an ePortfolio is, really, I suppose, there's many, definitions and descriptions that you'll find anywhere regarding this. But I think what we're kind of more or less saying is it's like a collection of work or evidence in electronic, I suppose, or digital format, which very much showcases learning over a period of time. And what we've done in terms of our ePortfolios, we adopted that obviously in terms of suiting the assessment period, and we have designed templates based on that. In terms of the overview for this morning, what we're going to do is I'm going to go through, I suppose, the big questions in terms of the why, the when, the how, and look at, I suppose, how we planned this, how we designed and implemented, and overall how it was managed in terms of a Youthreach service. Then my colleague Rachael is going to take over and steer the presentation, and she's going to give you a live demo of all the in-house designs that we've done for each of the portfolios, and she's going to give you a walkthrough of that and show you real life examples of ePortfolios from the assessment period gone out. Obviously, I know Ashley mentioned about the Mentimeter, and she's going to get some feedback on that. And we're very fortunate then we have the very well-known Dan Hamilton, who's going to obviously link in with us at the end. And I suppose you know, it's great. I was just saying before we came on an air there that we have Dan coming in, because he's giving us, I suppose, the external stamp of approval and feedback. And it's something I know myself and my team were very eager to, I suppose, get this year. And I'll explain why later on in the presentation, but it was really, really important for us. So, and then I suppose we're going to kind of wrap up with some questions and answers towards the end. Okay, so my first question, and I suppose it's something that I have been kind of asked an awful lot over the last, I suppose, few weeks, and certainly since, I suppose, August, since we had that wrap meeting and we got that really good feedback from Dan regarding the ePortfolios, was why we did it. I suppose, like everybody, you know, there on the 12th of March, you know, we all picked up our bags and, you know, our belongings and our toolkits, and we left, you know, and went working remotely online. And obviously that presented an awful lot of challenges to us, but I suppose from our perspective, we took it as an opportunity, I suppose, to kind of try something different in terms of ePortfolios. I, like you, you know, in terms of being a FET manager, I, you know, straight away was looking for, I suppose, new, innovative, creative ways, I suppose, to add to the existing stuff that we were already doing, to reach, teach and assess students remotely. I know I remember going on to the PDST website, which I know we're all very familiar with, and I was looking up kind of things, you know, things that were suggesting. I remember sharing and some of my colleagues sharing resources on Teams in terms of Youthreach of what we could use with our staff teams within our programs, within our subject areas. And I remember something came up at that stage in terms of ePortfolios. And obviously that was very much geared towards, I suppose, you know, primary school and secondary school. But I thought, you know, I remember coming back in a conversation with Caroline McCabe and Rachael Doherty at the time saying, look, we could easily do this in FET, we could easily do this in Youthreach. What do you think, girls? And the girls were very much on board straight away. So that was one of the initial reasons why we did it. I think the second reason was, to be fair, and I know Rachael very much alluded to this, I suppose over the last number of years, we've been very much kind of vision-wise looking to, I suppose, develop our programme and, I suppose, review our own pedagogy in terms of how we teach, reach and assess. And we have been moving towards this. And it was very much aligned with our own kind of programme development and planning, I suppose, going forward. So, which would have brought me to my third kind of reason of, you know, well, we were actually very well placed, which I do need to say, because I know how difficult this might seem to people, and I suppose challenging it might seem. We were placed well in terms of we were using the Google Suite, and we have been for quite a number of years. We've also were using the Google Classroom and the applications around that. We'd introduced other external apps like Padlet and Wakelet and other things like that. Obviously, we had a very strong background and a platform in terms of organisation speak, in terms of, you know, Office 365. So we knew that, you know, this obviously was going to be a challenge, but we felt that we could do it. And that was one of the main reasons as well, in terms of why we kind of moved forward with it. Which I suppose really brings me to my next kind of slide in terms of timeline events, because I suppose this is where it happened and when it happened. And you'll see there on your screens from April to August of exactly kind of how it panned out. We started in April really with an in-house staff discussion with myself and Caroline and Rachael initially. At that stage, we were reaching out actually to the PD coordinator, Ashley. And I remember emailing Ashley herself and Wendy going, have we anything in-house, guys, in terms of expertise that we could, I suppose, tap into or get support with or look at? Because we were kind of embarking on this and we weren't exactly sure how we were going to go about it. The other thing I would say is, you know, when I did have a conversation with both Caroline and Rachael at the time, they were so enthusiastic and very much on board straight away. And there really are those kind of team members where they'll just jump at anything and take a bite and go. But they actually went off and sought a PD opportunity through Wriggle themselves. And I remember them going off and doing the webinar going, Caitríona, look, is it okay if we do this? Can we try it out? And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Brilliant. Let me know how it goes. And they came back and they were just absolutely buzzing with enthusiasm and ideas. And yes, we could do this, and this is how we could do it. So I suppose really at that stage, it was kind of coming into a situation where we were starting to put a plan in place and starting to think and look at it, maybe a structure and a design around the template. We also, I remember actually in late April, also bringing it to my own Youthreach network meeting where we discussed with Ashley. Ashley was at that meeting as well, and Brenda Lynch, my previous line manager, and everybody was very on board. And, you know, look, this is something we were kind of bringing, saying, look, we were going to try out. I suppose May took us to the next step, really, was regarding design and that kind of structure and that template. And really kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of it. Now, I do have to say on this stage, obviously we were still in you know, nationally speaking, a lockdown. So a lot of the stuff was done remotely. It wasn't done in centre around tables or anything around that, or in staff rooms or in staff meetings. It was online during virtual meetings that we had a lot of this. There was also a lot of toing and froing between the staff team as they collaborated and got together and kind of put a structure and agreed kind of how it was. Ashley was also heavily involved, to be fair to her, and supported and guided the team in terms of overall, I suppose, globally speaking, you know, what we were looking for and how it would fit. And then obviously in terms of, I suppose, ensuring obviously a high quality, but also from a QA perspective, making sure that it was fit for purpose and we were compliant in terms of, that we were going to present in a way that was obviously expected and at the standard and the requirements in terms of the QA process. So we did a lot of work on that. It was done remotely. We got to a stage, I suppose, towards mid to end May, where we had a very simplified, uniform structure template that we were happy to kind of roll out and rolled out across all subject areas for assessment for the August assessment. So basically all staff received a copy of it. They would have collated all their learning evidence in a digital format. Again, like I said, because we'd used Google Classroom and the Google Suite, we had a lot of stuff already, I suppose, digitally recorded and kind of archived. Now, to be fair, we did have obviously some subjects we did have to come in centre and obviously when we were allowed in the June kind of stage where we could come in obviously with sanction in terms of if we did need to scan things in or take photographs or whatever that might be, that was obviously facilitated in June. But predominantly, I would say that most of our work was done obviously virtually and online at the time. Also, bearing in mind, obviously, from as you all know, in terms of the assessment and remote assessment learning and the changes regarding the assessment methods, we were changing assessment methods and we were already starting to remotely assess our students online. And one of the subjects that really sticks out is IT skills, and it's actually Rachael's subject area, and she'll go more depth into it later on when she gives you the demo. But we were already starting to make those changes online and assessing students remotely, for practical skills as well. So all of this, I suppose, boded well and came together very, very nicely. So that was pretty much in May. That's really what we did in terms of implementation and the collation. By June, really at that stage, the guys had populated all of their subject tutor portfolios, their student templates and stuff as well. And we were really kind of putting it in a middle kind of a common ground space of SharePoint where we created a file and collated everything for remote IB. At that stage, obviously, we were still working remotely, and I would have done the IV myself, because we'd only about 40 folders going through, so it was quite a small amount of folders. But I would have remotely IV that now at home, and I live down near Glendalough in a beautiful Wicklow Hill, so I did that down there, and that was very, very doable. The only thing I would say is I had one screen, and it was a Surface Pro, which is a little bit smaller than some laptops. Obviously, I would have preferred two screens. Two screens would have certainly helped me, and I've learned from that, and that needs certainly a recommendation I will be put in place. So that all happened in June. I suppose at that stage I was very much to and fro. I'd say for Sandra Cleary at times was wondering why Caitríona Cullen was emailing her so much. I was checking in with Sandra all the time, kind of for a week or two there before we were kind of given a yes or no regarding an EA status, because I was really pushing for this to be EA'd. And actually, I'd say Sandra didn't know exactly why I meant this, but what happened was then Sandra would have contacted and said we actually weren't targeted for EA, but we actually put in a request so that we could get this EA'd. And I think obviously at that stage, Aunt Sandra had a look at it and realised, yeah, okay, right, these are ePortfolios, we really need to kind of get these EA'd. And that's when she would have sourced Dan Hamilton, which was fantastic, and we were delighted to hear that. So that was June. And I suppose at that stage, Sandra would have obviously been sending me the shared folders, which she shared with all of you. And that's when we started, I suppose, collating our stuff and submitting it remotely to the QA office. Then obviously in terms of July and August, I suppose that's really when it was kind of, I suppose, handed over to Dan, and Dan was given access to those ePortfolios through the QA office. And Dan would have obviously done his EA process completely remotely from, I'm not sure where Dan lives, but wherever Dan lives, he did that. And then obviously it brings us right around to the RAP meeting in August. So that's pretty much the timeline of events of the kind of the when and the where. My next slide is very much about, I suppose, the process of the system that we have now in place, and the how, basically, of how we did it. So obviously we created the student and the tutor to ePortfolios along with the coordinator ePortfolios. And I suppose what I'm going to show you is just kind of screenshots of kind of, I suppose, the physical kind of process of how we did this. So when I click on the first one there, in terms of the sorry, I'm going to click back out of it and go back into it again. In terms of the West Wicklow ePortfolio template, what we did was, like I said, is I would have shared a KWT QQI assessment folder with my team. And this is where everybody this is where we kept our templates, but also where we submitted all the actual subject areas, which I'm going to show you now in a second. Now, so this is for QQI Level 4 in General Learning, and this is the programme that we would have submitted as subjects within this for the August assessment. So like I said, I would have created this QQI IV folder, and all of my staff team there would have collated all their portfolios within each of their subject areas. So you'll see a list of them there. Obviously, there you'll see the date stamps is June, and that's when they obviously would have submitted their final pieces for IV. The next step, like I said, would have been we also, in terms of the actual portfolios, we would have had to submit assessment links. This, I suppose, is further evidence or added evidence where basically a lot of the staff team would have had things like screencasts of, say, interviews or phone calls. We also had kind of screencasts of actually students completing online assessments, which Rachael will touch on later with you in terms of IT skills. So I suppose it's further assessment evidence that we would have submitted as well, along with the tutor portfolios, along with the student evidence folders as well. So that was that link there for that one. Then at that stage, like I said, the next thing obviously would be a remote IV process, which I would have obviously completed at home. And there's just a quick glimpse of the coordinator ePortfolio, which I would have used and completed. And this probably really highlights the need for the two-screen kind of obviously approach. Like I would have that open on one screen, but on another screen, I would have, say, the actual tutor or the subject to the student portfolio opened. And I would have completed that remotely there in my coordinator folder. So that just gives you an example. There's actually the internal IV report that I actually would have submitted in June. So that gives you an idea of that. And then obviously that would lead on to like the submission we made obviously to the QA team. And you will see there obviously the list of subjects just briefly under that kind of box. I purposely put that link box in. It's something myself and Rachael discussed, just to highlight that when we were sending, I suppose, our ePortfolios or linking our ePortfolios to the QA office, the shared folders that Sandra would have shared with myself and like she would share with all of you guys in terms of assessment, but we would have had to make sure that whoever we were sharing them with, just to make sure that they had editing privileges and stuff like that. So that's why I showed that link box there, but that's just a technical thing, but it's actually very important. But yes, so that basically is the IV submission box there. And obviously we would have linked all our ePortfolios across then to the QA office, which then in turn, obviously, like I said, was submitted to obviously Dan. Dan obviously was given access to his KWETV email account and he would have had full access. And that's just a screenshot there basically of a portfolio for students for IT skills that Rachael would have completed. And then at that stage, I suppose it was kind of out of our hands. Really, at that stage, it was at Dan's disposal in terms of the EA process. And then obviously it would have removed onto the remote wrap, which we all would have attended in August and gone from there. So I suppose overall, in terms of that process, the process that we put in place for this system, it just shows you from the beginning to the end, it was all remote and it was all digital. I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't, very not challenging, but it was challenging, but it took a lot of time, absolutely. But I do think we were well placed, and I do think it's something we've been building on. I think that very much helped the processes that we put in place and the system that we now have, if you like. Okay, so in terms of, I suppose, benefits, and I think these are, I suppose, it's almost like a sales pitch now to you guys in terms of FET managers, but these are true. This has been our experience in terms of our service, in terms of West Wicklow, but also in terms of my experience as a FET manager. It absolutely has streamlined this system. It has made it much more simpler. It's much more direct. It's easier to follow. It's very, very uniformed, and it's a very easy system to use. I would definitely feel, and we would definitely feel, that it has embedded the QA process much more strongly and coherently into what we're doing in terms of design, delivery, and of assessment, but also in terms of program planning now. Definitely time saving, because obviously everything is electronic. There's no physically touching of ePortfolios or evidence or coming and going out of centres. It was all done online and virtually. So for that reason, it was time saving. And it definitely was easy to replicate and copy and duplicate and that kind of thing too. So it definitely would be an easy system to adopt, I think. In terms of ease of access, completely, absolutely, anytime, anywhere. Like I said, I did the IV down near Glendalough, and Dan did his EA from wherever Dan lives. And the guys would have worked. I mean, I have 5 staff in 5 different counties at the minute that come, and they all worked all online. So it is very easy. It's also ticking a box in terms of GDPR compliance, because you're not physically taking stuff out of here. Everything is in a secure system in the cloud, and we're all using ETB accounts. So for that reason, it's very, it's very safe. In terms of the enhanced student experience and flexible feedback, absolutely. And you'll see that by what Rachael demonstrates further on in this presentation. But one of the things I think too is it was very much empowering students, in terms of independent learning. It's building flexibility where teaching and learning can happen, I suppose, anytime, anywhere. And I suppose it allows us to communicate and collaborate very effectively in a very safe way with both our students and our staff team. And I think that's obviously very important to us all at the minute. The uniformed approach and evidence backup is securely in account. The uniformed approach is very much where this template is, we're applying it across now teaching and learning portfolios, but obviously in terms of assessment, it looks the same. So when I was IBing or when Dan was EAing at the time, every portfolio he opened up was in the same structure, the same format. It was just different content, and it's very easy to follow when you know what to expect. The evidence obviously is backed up securely in the cloud, and that goes without saying, but we all have that experience now, and obviously it's working really, really well for us. Environmentally friendly, I think that ticks a really big box considering, I suppose, our current, global and national predicament in terms of the pandemic. We are taking a very strong box there. I mean, you're not talking about sheets of paper, folders, it's all electronic, so it kind of takes that element of it away. And obviously from that point of view, it's going to tick an economic box too in terms of being cost effective. One of the things I definitely would feel as well, in terms of benefits, in terms of staff benefits, and I think it's something I do need to really stress as a FET manager to you guys, is, obviously my staff, like I said, none of us are necessarily IT proficient. We don't have a background. We're not trained necessarily in IT. A lot of it is self-taught. And like I said earlier, we are still troubleshooting, but we are learning new skills, and those skills are very, very transversable across a lot of things now. And what we're learning in one thing, we're adding and multiplying across other areas within our roles and responsibilities. I do think it has enhanced our program planning. It's streamlined it. It definitely has increased our cross-curricular collaboration and our planning around subjects. I definitely would find my staff are working much more closely as a team, and they would have been beforehand, to be fair to them, but they are really at a high level at the minute. I think it's built morale. I definitely would find that I think that it's invigorated and refreshed their passion for teaching and learning, and I suppose reaching, teaching and assessing students in a very, very different way. And I think it has had huge benefits in terms of our staff experience of working on the ground, but also obviously working remotely as well, which has been very difficult for us all. And I think they're really, really important things, I suppose, to remember, particularly in times like like we're in at the minute. I suppose where we're going to go now, and that's a question I suppose we've kind of asked ourselves as a team, and it's something that we have been working on, and it's one of the reasons why we would have kind of requested that our ePortfolios were EA'd, because we had our plan of implementing and introducing our class notebooks in Teams for our teaching and learning portfolios, which we have rolled out here since September. And I suppose that's why we needed, I suppose, feedback from an EA to see what the standard is, to see what our mark was, see what changes were needed or anything needs to be added or taken away. And that's what we've done. So we've introduced two things, I suppose, really, is we've introduced the class notebook in Microsoft Teams, like I said, for teaching and learning, and that currently has been rolled out in Centre at the minute and working really, really well. We've also introduced that in line with the flipped classroom model, which again seems to be working really well. We're kind of third, fourth week into it at this stage, experiencing some teething problems, but I think that would be natural in terms of any program at the minute, but really starting to bed it down and kind of get it settled across the board in terms of staff and students and program planning, and that's working well. And obviously we're going to continue working towards our ePortfolios for the 2021 QQI assessment period. So that pretty much concludes, I suppose, my element of the presentation. I'm now going to hand you over to Rachael Doherty, my colleague, who's literally in another room next door to me, who's going to go through a live demo and really kind of take you through exactly what we have done on the ground, which Rachael, to be fair, has spearheaded and very much led in-house and worked very closely with Ashley Stevens in terms of getting this up off the ground and collaborating with the team and kind of really leading it. So I'm going to hand you over to Rachael, and she's going to go through that with you.
Thank you so much, Trina. Just making sure that my screen is sharing.
I'm going to see, can you share your screen there?
I think that's it now. If I click on,
is that
coming up for people?
I'm just trying to get out of mine. Bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, I think it's there now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trina. So as Trina said, I will take you all through some of the real life examples of the ePortfolios that we submitted for authentication this summer. But just before I do that, I did want to touch really quickly on the application that we used to kind of house these ePortfolios. And that application is OneNote. And so there was a couple of reasons why we went with OneNote for this. First of all, it's part of the Microsoft platform, as Trina said. So, you know, it's linked to all of our ATB accounts. We all have access. It's also really nicely linked and synced with things like OneDrive and SharePoint, where a lot of us, you know, will be storing files and things like that. So from that point of view, it was a natural choice. But as well as that, and I know Trina mentioned that I attended that Wriggle webinar back during lockdown, when I kind of was exposed to what OneNote was back in early summer, I realized that it was pretty much made for something like this. So you'll see, if you're not very familiar with OneNote, it's described a lot as a digital binder or an online folder or ePortfolio. And it's set up, its structure is that it has sections, and then within sections you can have pages. So it's literally like in our physical folders where we would have dividers or separators to organize. In addition to that, and I won't go into the technicalities of it, but there are some other kind of levels to how you can organize folders in OneNote. And then those levels really support that kind of standardized uniform approach that Trina spoke about. And it really allows all of our portfolios to look very similar and streamlined across our modules. So once we kind of made a decision on OneNote as the home for our portfolios, I got to work on constructing templates. And so in consultation and with a lot of support from Trina and Ashley, and also huge input from my other colleagues here in West Wicklow Youthreach, we put together 3 templates, one for the student ePortfolio, one for the tutor portfolio that you would submit along with your student's work, and then also a template for the coordinator's AA portfolio. I also took this opportunity, another big interest of mine was trying to simplify from my point of view and from tutors' point of views, that process each assessment period in terms of the documentation and all of the kind of submission sheets and things like that. We would have conversations about that annually, and this was a kind of a good opportunity to amend those. They needed to be amended so that they would work for an ePortfolio, but it also meant we could streamline those as well. So that's what we did. So once we had the templates created, as Trina said, we shared those just on our staff SharePoint site. And this would be the SharePoint site that Trina showed you in her screenshot. So this is basically all of the modules that we as tutors submitted for IV. And what I will do is I will go through, we'll have a look at IT skills first. As Trina said, that's one of my subjects. And we'll start out by looking at one of the student folders. Actually, I think I have it open here. Okay, so this is our student folder outline. So at the beginning of each student folder, I inserted a portfolio guide. So this is kind of like a table of contents or a guide for the reader as to where and how to find certain pieces of information. And then underneath that, each tab that you see here is a separate student's portfolio. So we had those named for each student, and I've just removed those and put initials for today. So if you click into any student, you will see 4 sections open, and they are the same for every student across all of the modules. So those 4 sections are, first of all, the portfolio authorship. So again, this was one of the templates that we amended. So this kind of served as what would have originally been the cover sheet on a traditional folder, but also getting the signature from the candidate that they're happy to submit and that it's their own work. The next tab is the marking sheet. So obviously that's your marking sheets out of the module descriptors. You can see there that I filled those with the draw function here in OneNote. So if you want, or if you like to do things like that, or even for IV, it can be very handy for ticking things off, filling things in pen as you go. Sometimes it's nice and easier to read like that. I did put in a section called supporting material because I do know in some students' cases and in some modules, there might be additional supporting evidence that might want to be included in folders, but that might not necessarily fit under kind of the stricter headings under the assessment tab. So for example there, because this was IT skills and it was fully remotely assessed this year, I had supporting evidence here that a particular task was completed within the allotted time, and that's in there as a video link. Okay, obviously most of the documentation then is under the assessment tab, and this is where tutors have a little bit of flexibility in how they lay this out. So obviously each section here, each piece of work is preceded by the brief, and then following on from that is the student's submission. So I'm just going to quickly show you a student submission here. So this was a task looking at skills around internet searches and email capabilities. So what this student would have done is submitted some screenshots to me as evidence that they could find certain pieces of info. There's some of my corrections here in Word. They also would have filled in information and filled in answers. And in addition to that, they also submitted screenshots, or a screen recording, I should say, which was amazing in terms of remote assessment, because it meant that it was completely transparent and it was absolutely clear that it was the student completing that piece of work. I'll just really quickly click on that so you can see that. So if I was to play this, this is the student carrying out that exam remotely at home. And then obviously in there you have the marking scheme that was used to calculate the final grades for the learner. What I want to do also is, so by the very nature of IT skills, it's more of an electronic subject, I suppose, and it was, as I said, 100% remotely assessed. So by its very nature, it is very suited to an ePortfolio. But I did also want to show you an example of a student folder from a more practical subject. So I have a folder here from design studies. So obviously the vast majority of the students' work in this case would have been carried out over the 2-year period in centre, and then some of it would have moved remote from March time on. So again, same template for portfolio authorship, marking sheets again out of the module descriptor. You can see this is my colleague Emma, she's filled those in, she's typed those in rather than using the draw function. Supporting material is there. She didn't need anything for that this time. And then just to show you some of the assessment work. So this is some of the students' work. It's just a nice example of some images and text together and how nicely laid out that can be. Also really wanted to show that we did have examples of work that were completed with pen and paper, and that's obviously still the most utilised method, especially for the students who just finished up after their 2-year programme. So we do have that in there, and it can be presented really nicely as well. This is a lovely example of obviously some drawing, also with some text. You can see Emma's feedback there, drawn in using the draw function. So you can see a lovely mix of different media there. And then I think the final piece for this was actually production of a cushion cover. So it's certainly not my area, but it is nice to be able to see how those more practical subjects can be presented in an ePortfolio and in a remote fashion. So that's the student folders. I'm going to jump over just to the Design Studies tutor folder so I can show you the outline of that. So I suppose the tutor folder is a little bit simpler. Instead of having all of the students, you know, this is just very simple 6 tabs. And this will be familiar to all of you in terms of the material that tutors have to submit for IV. So we do have in here, again, an outline of the portfolio and where to find certain things. An adapted template, again, that would have been the cover page on our folders previously. And then the assessor checklist, which we all fill just to make sure that we are including everything in our submissions. The next tab is for the provisional results sheet. Again, we took the opportunity to make a template for this and share it across all of the staff. So we're all using the same template for that in Excel. There's a space there for the component spec and the module descriptor to be slotted in. An important one here, I have a section for procedures for assessment, and I know for you all, in terms of your involvement with IVing and then also for EAs, it's quite nice to be able to access this information in one place. So this is whether for this module there was any reasonable accommodations, compassionate considerations, assessment malpractice, or cross-curricular elements, all of those which I think need to be captured on the IV report. So that's kind of the one-stop shop for finding any documentation relevant to those issues in the ePortfolio. And I think for design, there was some cross-curricular work with some other subjects there. Again, most of the material is found within the assessment tab. And again, you know, this is where there's a little bit more flexibility within this, depending on how the tutor has their assessment mapped out and how they like to break up their module. So obviously we all would have put in our assessment schedule. We all would have put in our evidence that we are giving feedback and documenting what our approach to that is. And then obviously we have the briefs. I know for IT, mine would have been slightly different. I would have had exam papers, exam solutions, and things like that. And this is one piece of work that I'm looking at the moment. I think we could streamline this even more from the point of view, depending on what assessment technique is being used. Whether it be a collection of work, we could lay that out a certain way. If it's an exam, we could lay that out a certain way. So again, there's probably more streamlining that we can implement there. Okay, so finally, in terms of the demos, I'll just show you, because obviously it's very relevant to all of you, the coordinator EA folder. So it's really nice and simple. And if there's any feedback from anybody or anything that you think we could include or that would be worth putting in here somewhere, please let us know. So again, we have our portfolio guide, so a guide to where you find the different bits of info. Again, standardized template about the award code, and the coordinator's contact details. We have a space here for the IV report. So Trina would have shown you a screenshot of that. And actually, I removed it here that I could show you how easy it is to insert all of this documentation. So to pop the IV report in here, you simply go to File, Insert File, and then choose it from either your computer or if you're using the cloud for your filing, and click Insert. And that will take a second because I think it's about 12 pages long. Let's see. Yeah. So hopefully you guys can see that. So it's just put that entire document in there as a printout. And then if there's any additional notes that need to be made on top of that, you have the ability to add type in text. You have the ability to draw over that. And so there's loads of options. Then we have a section for the previous EA report. So that would have been our EA report from August of 2019. And then finally, a place for the QBS printout as well. So that is the overview of some of our real live portfolios from the summer. As Trina said, we're absolutely not IT experts. OneNote, I think I first opened OneNote in the spring. So we have come a long way, but it is possible. It's fantastic to get to present to you all as coordinators and managers of programs and to get any feedback that you have. It's definitely still a work in progress. And I'd really like to take the opportunity to give a huge thank you to my manager, Trina, who has just been fantastic, and also to Ashley, my other colleagues here in the centre, and also members of the QA team who were bouncing ideas off at the moment as well. So thank you so much. I can pass over to you, Ashley, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rachel. It was fantastic to see the ePortfolio project, I suppose, come to life, you know, within the organization. So thank you so much for sharing it in such an accessible and user-friendly way. Absolutely fantastic. So with that in mind, I'm going to share a very quick Mentimeter poll with you all, just to try and capture your thoughts on ePortfolios in your context. So I'm going to share the link in the chat and then I'll bring it up on my screen. So you can either click on that link to join or I'll share my screen now. So if you have your phone in your hand, you can also go to www.menti.com and then use the code 28800908. And when you get in there, you can use the little toggle slider to kind of give your thoughts a rating there. So you can drag it across to increase your score. And please do feel free to be very honest with this. We will be using this data for developing supports for ePortfolios. It's great to see your thoughts coming in on that. I'm going to give about another 30 seconds on this slide just to try and capture everybody's thoughts today. Okay, it looks like they've stabilized there. Thank you very much. And then on the last one, just when it comes to the QA of ePortfolios, if you have any questions or considerations or concerns or anything that pops into your mind or anything that you are thinking of during the presentation, please do pop them in here. And, you know, in preparation for the webinar for tutors, we are hoping to do a review and kind of look at the QA requirements for ePortfolios with the QA team. So if you have any concerns or questions, please pop them in here because we're really hoping that we will be able to share an organisation uniform template with coordinators and tutors when we come to the next webinar. So please do pop your questions or your considerations or any of your thoughts that you have in on this slide. Okay, these thoughts and considerations and questions are really, really useful. And I'm just thinking in the background here, it could be really worthwhile putting together a frequently asked questions kind of guide to go with these. So that's something that we can do in the background and have ready for the next webinar. So again, I'll leave another couple of minutes there for any questions or thoughts that you want to add in. Okay, so if people are finished, if you're not finished yet, you can still add to that poll. I will leave it open there, and I'll leave it open for the rest of today if you have any thoughts or ideas that you'd like to add. But thank you so much, really valuable kind of questions and considerations coming in there, and we really appreciate that feedback as well. So with that in mind, I believe we have Dan Hamilton in the house. Dan, can you hear me? You might need to unmute yourself, Dan.
How's that?
That's perfect. Dan, you are very, very welcome to this morning's webinar, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I know you were involved in the external authentication process across in West Wicklow Youthreach, and so far we've had the journey mapped out from when the ePortfolios were just a thought and an idea over there. And Caitríona has brought us through the coordinator's journey, and then Rachael just completed doing a live demo of the system. So you're very welcome, Dan, and I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Thanks a million. So look, it was a breath of fresh air to see the presentation, as in the access system that you'd provided for me to EA those 3 modules back in August. A couple of years ago, I did a few presentations for Angela Higgins on using IT and going digital with assessment and presenting evidence and assessments and so on in that way. And I guess that every year I was expecting to see something like this. And I always thought that it was a need to have, but I think that the appetite wasn't there for it generally, nationally that is, and that it was viewed as more of a nice to have. And the current situation that we find ourselves in, or the situation that you found yourselves in back in the summer, it certainly did transpire to be a need to have. Because without it, I don't think that EAs would have been able to take place, and certainly there would have been huge obstacles to quality assurance in general. So what I found during the last batch of EAs back in the summer was generally a huge amount of stress to go through the process, the QA process, and the stress was much higher in providers that weren't ahead of the posse in terms of digital assessment and the digital provision of evidence. So a lot of providers ended up scanning huge amounts of material to make it available online, or sending out the material in boxes and so on and so forth. And I don't think that captures the amount of stress that was behind it all. There were a couple of providers who did very well, and there was massive organization behind it. And even though they had set up systems where they had online access to folders and so on, the navigation of those folders was really, really difficult. So you'd be constantly drilling down through folders and then coming back up. And there was no provision there for nice, clean helicopter views of the material that you guys managed to get over the line, and get over the line very well. So I'm just going to comment a little bit about what I saw this time, and I'll refer back to traditional approaches as well while I'm doing that. So first of all, I thought that the portfolio design was excellent. It was very clear and enabled a very clear overview, a very clear helicopter view. And this was really enhanced by the intuitive design behind this. There was a great application of color coding. The sections were kept to the most significant sections, so I wasn't overburdened with a huge amount of different sections to go through, which made it very easy for me to appreciate what I was looking for, why I was looking for it, and where I could find it. So in terms of a cognitive effort on behalf of the EA, this was really, really easy for me. Again, because of that design, it was just so simple. The online access was secure, so no issues there in terms of GDPR or complexity, but the security was there. So it was very, very easy to access everything. So when I say everything, I mean absolutely everything. All of the information that's needed for the EA process, the signatures that were required to see the students have signed off, to see the sign-offs from the tutors, to see the sign-offs from IV, to see the IV reports, to see the previous EA reports, to see the briefs, to see how the briefs link to the learning outcomes, to see how the evidence response links back to those briefs, and so on and so forth. Now, if I go back and look at the traditional method of that, you would normally find me walking into a building and I'd be shown a room with maybe a half a dozen or a dozen tables and maybe 50 or 100 boxes of stuff, and then on each table you've got different folders. So the traditional method, again, I take a look and I say, okay, where's the tutor folder? And the tutors put out a folder and they have all their briefs in it, and that's one folder. And then I have a bunch of other folders that have all the students' responses in it. So I take out the tutor folder and I open that up and I have it on the table, and then I open up a students folder and I put that on the table. And before I can do any of that, I have to do all the sampling. So the sampling is one sheet, and then I have to go through all of these folders to see what's a grade, you know, what's a distinction, what's a merit, and all that stuff. So it takes time. Now, I can moan about the time it takes for me, but I don't think I'm going to get a whole lot of sympathy. But I do have sympathy for the people who put all that together. So all of those folders didn't just miraculously appear on those tables. They're compiled, they're printed, they're put together. It's a massive amount of work. And it's not appreciated by the EA. Now, you might have EAs that say, I do appreciate it, but when we're in there, we're not really getting bowled over saying, my God, the amount of work that's gone into this. We have a limited amount of time to get a task done, and sometimes a limited amount of time to say a massive amount of work went into the organization here. Now, I do want to acknowledge the amount of effort and work that goes into the organization involved in the traditional method. However, I've always had concerns that that type of approach would lead to the QA process being seen as an obstacle rather than something that supports great teaching and great learning environments. And I think that this system, the digital system, is something that really allows an external set of eyes to be able to appreciate what's put in front of them, because all of those barriers to access are removed. The tables are gone, those big folders are gone, and instead we have really clear signposts that say, this is what you're looking for, this is where it is, and you only have to use one thing to access it. Well, two things really, your eyes and that, just a click and you're in. So in that sense, I found this to be a very relaxing experience. It was just so simple and easy to navigate. I have to go back to the design of this and say that the landing page, the ePortfolio, they were intuitive. The user interface just made it so user-friendly. It didn't need a guide, even though a guide was provided. But I found that I could just open it up and I could understand it basically without any cognitive effort at all, because it was just so clearly signposted. Just to move on a little bit onto the types of evidence, the evidence generated, I felt, enhanced the modules that I looked at. Now, I mean that in a couple of contexts. One is that, and I think this is very important, that the use of this platform and the use of IT helped to, I think, enhance the IT efficacy of all of those involved. So every learner that was involved in this, because all of this originated digitally, or most of it originated digitally, they were increasing their IT proficiency. So not only did they get a work experience module completed, but in parallel to completing that, they were developing their IT skills. And I'm not going to get political now, but we can see what happens when people's IT skills are not developed, when people's IT skills are left to become stagnant, or when people's IT skills are just ignored completely. And where can we see this happening? We can see it happening in banking. So if you don't have access, or you're unable to access online facilities, you're generally going to get hit harder with things like interests and loans and deals and so on. If you're trying to pay bills, it's the same thing. Now, we've seen a section of society being hit by that, and they are the older members of our community. And there's been a lot of talk recently because of the virus about connection and the ability to connect using an interface like this and a platform like this. And we've seen how older generations could not access that. Now, if they had something like this when they were younger, they would be capable of connecting and capable of using all of these IT systems for many other things. So the learners who are going through a system like this are really getting a lot more than the modules that they've completed. They're really getting some fundamental life skills now. And I mean absolutely fundamental. So I think that there's a huge benefit in this approach, which is a life benefit. But going back to the evidence then again, this type of approach, in my opinion, enhances the integrity of the assessments that are being applied here. And therefore they strengthen the awards. So as an example, if we look at something like the IT skills module, there's some exam components to that and some skills demonstrations to that. Traditionally, when I would be looking at something like that, the evidence for that, I would be looking at the outcome of the exam or the outcome of the skills demonstration. And that would generally be something like a printed document that has been assessed by the teacher and marked and valued and rationale and so forth. But I'm getting a freeze frame of that skills demonstration, a freeze frame of the exam. But using a system like this, I was actually able to see the skills demonstration taking place. I could see the words appearing on the screen. I could see the data entry. I could see all of that happening. Therefore, integrity extremely high. In addition to that, I could see the image of the learner completing it at the time live. So I don't think that capturing the integrity of an exam condition gets better than that. I just don't think it's possible. So I think that you've reached the highest level of integrity in terms of the implementation of exams and skills demonstration using this facility. It totally eclipses the traditional method. And the evidence, the output of the evidence, I think that it looks great for the EA, but as a standalone, as a piece of currency in itself, it's a demonstration of the learner's skill. And I've said before that pieces of evidence like that, when taken out and shown to perhaps a potential employer, it's very, very, very attractive. And it really does show a lot more than just that level 4 module does on its own. I think it's proof. This is what I can do, and this is how I can do it. So on multiple levels, this is excellent evidence. And now I'll just move on to a little bit about the assessment, the transparency of which was, I mean, it was crystal clear. again, I don't think it could have got any better. It was very, very easy for me to look at things in parallel. Like, for example, I could have high-level marking sheets open on the left side of my screen. I could have the learner responses open on the right hand of my screen, and those learner responses are also marked using word review, for example. So I could look at the learner evidence, I could see the high-level marks, and then I could look and appreciate the deep dive into the makeup of those high-level marks through the word review function. And this really enabled the marking to jump off the screen. So the functions that were available on word review and Excel and so on, they're like little signposts, and you don't have to search for them. They're just there, they jump out. So you can immediately ascertain that the level of the assessment, you know, that you can say it's comprehensive, and you can identify best practices really quickly, and you can call them out. And in my report, rather than describing them, which is what I would normally be doing, I was able to screenshot them and say, this is best practice, here's the example. And I was able to do that, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 times. So it gave the report more integrity as well, because, well, you knew that I was looking at it, because how would I screenshot it otherwise? So I think it enhances the EA process as well, because you know that this EA did look at that material. So in that sense, it's adding another layer of integrity to the QA process. This type of system as well also enabled me to see the judgment of the evidence in a more comprehensive manner and an easier to digest manner as well. Again, this is all down to the user interface, the design, the simplicity that's used in it, and how the marking just jumps off the screen. And we can see very clearly then about judgments of evidence and so on. And even, you know, we can have, I can listen into feedback given by the teacher to the learner, which is just absolutely unbelievable. In my report, I think I said that it was the best implementation that I'd seen. And I probably, no, hold on. I shouldn't have said I think. It was the best. And I've seen many IT providers attempt something like this, and they've overcomplicated it. And I still had to appreciate their efforts, and I still tipped my hat and said it was fantastic. But this is the most approachable and the most accessible and the best implementation that I've ever seen. And so that's over a decade of traveling around and looking how it's been implemented. And I hope that it takes off. I really do, because I think that I could see the human approach in this. I could see the human involvement in it, and it wasn't all just black and white. There was a huge amount of energy. I could see the attempts there to really engage the learners and to make them more comfortable using IT platforms and video, for example. And I think it's really going to benefit them in the long term, and in the short term, and in the medium term. I hope that this is publicized. I hope that it's seen, because I think that there's a worry out there that implementing something like this is alien, it's out of reach, and it's essentially just like the Matrix screen with all the little green numbers and digits falling down it. It's not. It looks like this. It looks really accessible, and I just thought it was the easiest EA that I've ever done. It was simple, and it put a big smile on my face when I was able to appreciate all of that evidence and the assessment practices and all that. It made me proud to be involved in education. So from an EA point of view, it's a dream. It's an absolute dream. It was so easy to access, zero obstacles to me, everything really easy to access and validate. I could see, you know, integrity jumped off the screen, and assessment practice was really easy to identify and call out and see that it was best practice. And the evidence, like I said, it's just been enhanced there's a lot more color to this, and it's much richer as a result. And I would think then that because it's much richer, to me, that the experience for the learner would be much better as well. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, online classes and all that are better. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in terms of assessment and delivery of assessment, providing something like this is something that when I look at it, I'm proud of it, and I didn't have anything to do with it except just observe it. But for anybody who was involved in it, from the teaching side of it to the learner side of it, when they look back on this, they're going to know that they were part of a vanguard, and that this really does look absolutely brilliant. So there's my glowing appraisal. I'm happy to take questions or challenges, actually.
Dan, thanks a million for that. I think you really captured the essence of the project there, but also, I guess, you know, how important it is to kind of utilize the learning from West Wicklow Youthreach across the organisation, and if at all possible, if we could have a global approach, I think it could be a very powerful tool for QA across the system. So with that in mind, I have Sandra Cleary from the QA team who has her hand up. Sandra, do you want to unmute yourself and go ahead?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Dan. I would just like to thank Caitríona, Rachael and Dan for giving us all an insight now into the design, organisation, implementation and the authentication process of the EA portfolios. I think it did highlight how we can promote individuality within centres while still adhering to consistency, integrity and standardisation across the organisation. We are currently reviewing streamlining practice, documentation and the request for the constant signatures across the organisation, and that will be in tandem with these academic webinars that we are running. So once again, thank you everybody, and great work. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Sandra. So from there, if anybody would like to raise their hand and ask a question, please do. If anyone has anything that they'd like to ask, add, challenge, please just raise your hand and then you can come on and unmute yourself. Brenda, would you like to come on?
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you to the West Wicklow Youthreach team for developing this and seeing it through to the end, and then for the great presentation and the demonstration in particular. I think we do a lot of our discussions in an abstract, so to be able to actually see the demonstration was very, very useful. And then of course, Dan, thank you so much for your feedback. Obviously, you know, that's the key to actually how it works for the EA, because it's about streamlining the entire process. Mm-hmm. And just on that note, I wonder if Sandra, not to be putting Sandra on the spot, but you know, we could just get a little insight from that side of it. So just from the management side of it, from Sandra's perspective, you know, I'm assuming it worked well because it worked, you know, but I just wonder if Sandra would like to add anything to that.
Well, it did work extremely well, but it worked for it was all on OneDrive. So it was a case of once the EA had access through, they were given temporary online KWETB login accounts. And once I just shared the folders with Caitríona, and Caitríona then would have uploaded the ePortfolios, the same as other centres would have uploaded just the ordinary folders. So it was done at centre level. I would have just shared the folders. I would have created all the folders. They uploaded the ePortfolios, and then I would have shared them with the EA. So the feedback, like, it is the consistency. And when you're looking through all the portfolios, the way the ePortfolio was laid out, every portfolio was laid out the same. Whereas where centres may be uploading other portfolios, it's not, the consistency mightn't be there. So EAs might have to go forwards and backwards to find what they're looking for, whereas in the ePortfolios, everything is laid out and it's straightforward, and it's just there for them, laid out. Would you agree, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think that's sometimes an issue, that you can have different approaches, and yeah, you can be altering your navigation system. But in this, it was just constantly intuitive, and because it had that repetition while seeming fresh, it was just it was the easiest and most accessible system that I've seen. And like I said, because of the accessibility, it was just much easier to deep dive and appreciate it much quicker. So it took all of the administrative burden away from me.
Okay, Angela, you have your hand up there if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. Thanks a million, Caitríona and Rachael. Well done. And just as a reflection on the system, I think it really shows and highlights how having a consistent system is like the scaffolding. And when you have a consistent system that everybody understands and knows, that makes it much easier to be freer in the real focus on the kind of content and the quality and richness of the content that learners can produce, and the approach that teachers take to their teaching. So that's fantastic. And thanks for your input, Dan. I had one question. Did you get any comments from the learners about what were their reactions to the ePortfolios like? Or did you hear anything from them?
Do you want to take that, Trina?
I can do, yeah. And please feel free
Yeah.
to interject. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was very much towards the end of the year, so they would have been aware on the ground kind of what we were doing. Like, I suppose ultimately, the overall picture in the grand scheme of things, in terms of our team and planning, we would probably see that we kind of put the cart before the horse. In terms of the process, we would obviously, in terms of teaching and learning, the assessment would come during or after. Whereas we kind of did the teaching and learning bit first, and then did the cart in terms of the assessment ePortfolio. So they would have seen elements in terms of a collation of it and what we were doing, but they may not have seen the full entire end process because we were very short on time. But what I would say going forward now, as we mentioned in our presentation, we have rolled out an ePortfolio now for teaching and learning. So we're using this in the classroom. So on the ground now, we have approximately about 12 second years who are using another structure, not unlike it, but just obviously aimed at teaching and learning within the classroom, using Class Notebook in Teams. So they have that experience and they're already getting into it. And they have come on the back of, been working from home and remote learning and blended learning and online learning. So they were very well placed, I suppose, in second year now to go on and start this. I would say on the ground, it's going really, really well. Actually, myself, Ashley, and Rachael had a conversation just before we came on an air this morning regarding a student of Rachael's who was actually using Genially, which is this presentation, very effectively in the classroom, who had no training and literally just took up Genially yesterday and put together a presentation on an element in biology for something to do with the heart. Rachael, am I right in saying that? I remember seeing a heart diagram.
It was.
And working really well. And I suppose, they're migrating, and a lot of these children, the young people, are natives to technology, whereas we're kind of migrating in ways, I suppose, in terms of, our own skills. But a lot of these kids are native, so they're reacting very well on the ground. They are engaging with the portfolios. And again, because we've now applied the same approach in terms of that uniform structure, we have a uniform structure across our ePortfolios for teaching and learning. So no matter what classroom they go into, virtually or in-house now, because we're allowed to do that, they are accessing the same structure and look, but just different content. So they know what it looks like. They just know it's going to be different when they go in, that it's going to be human biology or it's going to be maths or whatever the subject area is. But on the ground, they're reacting really well and they are able to navigate it. And obviously we're doing a lot of support in-house in terms of onboarding and I suppose in-house training with our students and our staff team, to be fair. And I suppose on a daily basis, we are still troubleshooting 100%. We had a conversation before we came online regarding actually teams and channels this morning, and we're bringing in a new pod and how we're going to structure that. And we're having these conversations on a daily basis. It's very normal for us now in terms of our planning.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks,
Angela, and thank you, Caitríona. So Niamh, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks, Ashley. Well done. I mean, just add my congratulations to Caitríona and Rachael. A fabulous presentation and really great to get such feedback from Dan. I suppose my question really was for Dan in relation to, I mean, we've know Dan well in KWTB, and we know how much he enjoys the IT, and it's fantastic to have somebody who has that experience and it can kind of interact with it. And I'm just wondering, do you think other EAs might require some training or support around accessing this type of ePortfolio and assessment presentation?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Look, sometimes I think that EAs can be so overwhelmed with the boxes and the material and stuff like that they focus on making sure that the integrity is there, and they don't get time then to describe practices, and they don't get time to describe good practices, and they don't get time to call out best practices. And that's not good for the morale of the people involved in this circle of quality assurance, which is the teachers. In fact, it's terrible. So this system, I think, really gives time to be able to call out the good practices and celebrate them. Unfortunately, though, I do believe that there is a big cohort of EAs that don't have the IT competence to be able to do this. So yeah, they need to be upskilled, or at the very least, I think that you have to exercise some due diligence when you're getting in EAs, that you have to make sure that you get somebody who's competent enough to be able to recognize the competence that's on display.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much, Niamh. Lynn, you had your hand up there. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just again, well done, Caitríona and Rach. It's fabulous to see it in motion, and I think like one of the biggest things there, just looking at it, is around that standardization. And as Dan said, you're kind of dipping in and out of things without having to go back through 20 folders that are stacked on a desk beside you, and been able to do that. I mean, OneNote is excellent to navigate in and around that, and as Caitríona and Rachel said, it's really well suited to this. I think our next steps need to be, kind of informing the teachers around, and the teaching staff in particular as they engage with that. I mean, learners have taken on a huge chunk of new learning with Teams. And realistically, this is just going to be an extra tab at the top of their Teams page for a lot of stuff. So I think we're in a good position for kind of rolling out just that one extra thing with them, as it becomes the norm for them very easily. Like Angela said, standardizing how things look, and Dan, kind of put that every portfolio looks the same. That'll make it easier for less competent EAs, because they're not looking for, they're not looking at 20 different styles of, e-portfolio. So I think that will benefit if, as an organization, we can kind of pull together now and standardize those e-portfolios and provide the training in OneNote, which I know there's already stuff on the PD website. But I think it'll be a real benefit to us all from a teaching and learning perspective, but quality assurance as well. So really well done, and thanks for the input. Yeah.
Thanks, brilliant. Lynn. Would anyone else like to come on or ask a question?
Dan?
Yeah.
I don't suppose you could get yourself on the panel for our inaugural review, could you? Our inaugural quality review.
Hey, look. Point fingers in my direction. Point fingers in my direction. No, look. I would love to hear challenges to this. I would really encourage somebody to be a devil's advocate here. And in the absence of that, I'll throw something out myself.
I have one for you, Dan, and
okay.
or I suppose for everyone. I suppose one of my big concerns, and I was really glad that Rachael demonstrated the graphic design module.
Yeah.
Because one of the big risks, I think, is the loss of the dirty, messy work that students can get involved in, that where there's this hands-on learning, and as you know, all learning is related to the head, hand and heart. So the only concern I have is that we could lose some of those opportunities for learning for learners. And we know that actually hands-on work is really critical to their learning. So I think for me, kind of trying to make this model as that scaffolding that I talked about to really enable easy sharing of the work that learners do and easy assessment, but while still retaining a focus in our programs on this access to the down and dirty work that learners can do at the moment. So I don't know whether that's a challenge or not, Dan, but it's a concern.
Yeah, I guess that when you have evidence of the down and dirty work, it proves that it's happening. It shows development in learning. It shows progression. It allows you to look back at where you've come from and so on. It's very hard to capture that in a physical reality, but in using digitization, as in the digital documentation of that journey, you can capture it. And you know, if you're talking about something like graphic design or anything like that, a lot of the times when I'd walk in, I'd see those huge folders. I knew that I was never ever going to be able to get to fully appreciate that, and it saddened me, because I'd look at the teacher, I'd look at the effort that was put into compiling that, and I know that I'm going to be missing 50 or 70% of it. And that the teacher might refer to a piece and say, this piece was fantastic, and I would not be able to acknowledge it. I'd have to say, well, I looked at something else. But in this way, I can get a digital copy of something that was done physically. I could even get a 3D representation of it, a virtual reality video of it, something that I can rotate. I can really appreciate that. And then I can really look the teacher in the eye and say, I did see the work and I recognize it. And I recognize your judgment of it. And I recognize the effort behind it. And I think that that's what digital does. It just allows us to capture physical realities and talk about them. So I think that the challenge to teach it and to capture it physically is there, but the ability to be able to capture it digitally and reflect on it and appreciate it is also there.
Brilliant, Dan. And it also links into the students, as you said, Caitríona, their existing capacity. It's actually moving into their world in terms of documenting what they do too. We have to say that, or we have to see that. Brilliant, thanks.
Absolutely.
Lynn, do you have a challenge?
Yeah, just I think at centre level, it's standardized resources that everyone's working with, you know, the same software, that has the same access to IT, be it Surface Pros for using, as we said, you know, the draw function, or an iPad, or a tablet that you can connect into your laptop for different things. You know, it's just making sure that, you know, based on where students are and the resources that are available to them, I think it needs to be more universal what we're rolling out there, that, you know, everyone has an equal opportunity to use those programs and engage with them fully. You know, acquiring licenses at organizational level that can be rolled out is huge. And again, just making sure that we have the right equipment to capture, like Angela said, you know, those kind of tactile subjects that you can really show what's been done and how they've been developed. So I think that'll be a challenge to get off the ground, to make sure that everyone has access to all of those things and kind of audit the software we have, and, you know, kind of how we move forward. But I think it's an easy challenge to overcome, but it's definitely something that needs a bit of work to start with. Yeah.
Thanks a million, Lynn. Very valuable points in that. Louise?
Yeah, hi folks. Thanks, Ashley. Just again to add my congratulations to Trina and Rachel and all the team in West Wicklow. It's absolutely fantastic. And hello, Dan. Good to see you again. Great to get the feedback. But I suppose, like, one little challenge for me, and we've chatted about this before, some of us would be that where we're talking about, say, the capacity of EAs, for example, we're going to definitely have similar challenges with the capacities of some of our tutors in relation to IT. And, you know, to kind of come on the back of what Lynn was saying there. So, you know, obviously we need to make sure kind of equal access to resources and everything like that, but there's also going to be a definite requirement for a real push with some staff to support them from an IT capacity point of view. But I'm saying that I don't think that's something that we can't overcome, even with some of probably the most challenging ones that some of us would have in our centres, because I think everybody would be really motivated by this. I think that's probably key to being able to see it, the live action, for example, and when there's a staff version of this, just being able to see it live. And I think, and I put it in the chat actually a little bit earlier, it's really valuable for everybody to know that you guys had to learn on the job as well.
100%.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
And
that
still
you weren't
are
coming
every
to this
day.
as, that you weren't, you know, I mean, Dan's been talking about ePortfolios for about 10 years now. You'd know what to do, Dan, but a lot of us don't. So, and I think the fact that everybody will know and see that you guys had to learn on the job will be really valuable. Do you know what I mean? So it's a case of, look, you know, most of us will be able to get this and get somewhere with it. And then for those of us who have maybe one or two staff members who will definitely struggle from an IT perspective, that we can encourage that and take steps. Like, I think there's some really nice baby steps that can happen. For example, the idea of being able to record the down and dirty. So recording stuff that's going on in woodwork rooms and putting video evidence up. And it's going to make it a much more accessible way to see that digital evidence. And as Dan was saying, it will encourage the EA to look at that, because over the years, we've all had that feeling of, you know, the way you put all that lovely stuff in your USB and it gets stuck into the folder, you know, the tutor folder, it's all sitting there, and then you go back and it hasn't even been unsealed and the tutor is heartbroken. And they're like, oh my God, nobody looked at all my digital evidence. I put loads of videos on there. And it's not that the EA would have done anything wrong. They just wouldn't have had a chance to look at that particular piece of evidence. Where if it's all there in front of them in a digital format, they're going to be much more likely to engage with that and to see it. And I think that'll really encourage any tutors who are scared of this from an IT perspective to know that they can, you know, even straightforward things like videos and really good photos of their work, that can all be captured digitally and is much more likely to be seen by an EA. And I think it's lovely also, you know, I mean, for years, a lot of us have tried to use the flexibility we have within QQI, whereby we can assess in different ways. It doesn't all have to be paper. You know, you can do a reflection on work experience through an interview with a young person. They can sit down and talk about it and reflect on it, and you'll get so much more valuable work that way. And again, I think it will come together much more powerfully in an ePortfolio format. So yeah, like, I mean, there's going to be a challenge there with some of our staff, but I really do think they'll be very motivated by the success that you guys have had, and I think that's going to be a really good start. So yeah, so well done, and thanks.
Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Louise.
Thanks a million, Louise. I'm just conscious of the time there, but we've one hand up. So Deirdre.
Hi guys. First of all, just to say, God, it's great to attend such a positive webinar and hear feedback from Dan, and well done everybody. It's just great. But Dan was asking for the overview. You know me, I always have overviews. I just want to put out, I suppose, and I know everybody's aware of this, but the equality versus equity, you know, for our learners, like the learners that Dan's talking about, older people who don't have those tech skills. I'm just a word of caution that, you know, yes, we definitely need to streamline things, but I would just be wary that the tutors wouldn't pass on that this is the way we do things and you need to meet us at this level. You know, I just think, again, it's the low-hanging fruit. You know, yes, it makes things clearer for the FET manager, for the EA, but I just think we just have to be very careful not to push the onus of this technology bit onto the learners. And I know we don't have to, you know, as we said, in the classroom, but just, you know yourself, it's like the new normal. Let's just be careful that it doesn't become a new normal where, again, the people who are being disadvantaged in the pandemic and in the employment market are again put under extra pressure, you know, as we try to streamline and improve our services. That's all I just want to put out there. But a fantastic to hear the great work and the teamwork that was done there. So well done, guys.
Thanks a million. I might just really quickly come in on that, because that's something that we're kind of constantly like saying to ourselves here. And, you know, I teach maths as well. So, you know, I'm very conscious in that subject and in others that often a pencil and a piece of paper and a compass and a protractor, you know, is what's needed and is what should be used, you know. And even in other subjects where students really just prefer, you know, to handwrite certain things, we're absolutely promoting that as well. You know, like students, I saw one of the questions on the Menti was like, how did the students submit the handwritten work? And that was just simply like them taking a quick photo of it. So definitely there are ways of maintaining those other approaches, and that it's just displayed in the electronic format.
Do you mind if I jump in there?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge some brilliance around the screen. Louise, when I came across Louise's work in Kells many years ago, I was absolutely blown away. She was using video like it was 2020. It was really fantastic stuff, and she's still doing that in Wicklow. And then Rachael and Caitríona and the people that were involved in this are all brilliant as well. But I want to allay some fears. I don't believe that you need to be brilliant to implement this. I don't believe that you need to be brilliant to acquire the skills to do this. I think that you can be average, you can be below average, you can be scared, you can be slow to take it up, but it can be done. And Louise and Rachael and Caitríona and the learners that they brought through this are proof of that. And I think that the brilliant people that are here today have an opportunity to role model this. And however they role model, whatever their experience is, it's very likely that it's going to be mirrored by somebody. They're going to experience the same thing. They might not grasp it as quickly, and they might grasp it quicker than you. But that's just it. It's a small progress, and it can be incremental for some, and it can be very fast for others. I don't subscribe to this being a new normal. I don't subscribe to that term, the new normal. It's not normal. But what this is progress. And I think that this would have happened maybe 4 or 5 years down the line, and it would have happened naturally. Yep. But now there is a real need for it to happen. And I would definitely encourage it to happen. And at the same time, recognize that teachers are under a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. There's a lot of burnout happening all around the place. And I think that this is a way to reduce workload. Yeah. So I would definitely be encouraging exploring this and upskilling it into it, because in the long run, in the medium and long term, this is going to reduce your workload. And Lord knows you have a big workload as it is. So front load into skills development to facilitate this, and you'll be able to reap the benefits and appreciate your rest when you need it.
Very, very true. Dan, thanks a million for sharing that. I think the biggest thing as well that, for staff on the ground who are delivering programs and modules in their classrooms, they actually get time back to do what's important, and that's the teaching and learning side. Yeah. And I think that's key when it comes to this. So there's lots of things that we can do as an organisation to support any of the programs that would like to go down the route of implementing ePortfolios, and that is something that we will be looking at and working on in the background. I really value your feedback that went into the Mentimeter, and again, work will be going on behind the scenes to try to streamline the processes for QA that are required for ePortfolios. So that is something that will be looked at. To come back on that, the tutor webinar for ePortfolios will take place on the 11th of November at 9:30 a.m. And all coordinators would have received communication about that, and the link to register for the session is available in the PD team site as well. So with that in mind, I would really like to thank Caitríona and Rachael. Thank you so much for bringing the ePortfolios to life for us. Dan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and giving us the time and space to have that external viewpoint on the ePortfolios. It really makes it a huge difference to have outside eyes looking at our quality systems as well. Pleasure. I'd also really like to thank the QA team, I suppose, for making this possible and bringing it all together. I think kind of getting the external authentication set up for this period to get that feedback in the first place for West Wicklow Youthreach during the authentication process back in June was key, but also working alongside the team in Blessington Youthreach to make this a success. You know, it's been a multifaceted approach here to bring the portfolio journey in West Wicklow Youthreach to where it is. So thank you all very, very much, and really appreciate your time, and we hope that you've been left with some inspiration and some food for thought when it comes to ePortfolios.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Ashley. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.